What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and typically on Mondays I put out 2 different trade videos talking about sell high players and then buy low players. With the trade deadline coming up and we're so far into the season, I feel like it's harder to come up with quality options for both videos. I'm going to combine those 2 videos today, so go through some buy lows, also talk about a couple sell highs. So only one trade target video this week, but just kind of combining it. As always, if you have any fantasy questions, drop them down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And then I do just want to give you guys a heads up on the kind of content schedule throughout the rest of the week. So I'm going to be out of town starting Tuesday, and I just won't be, in a spot where I can be making videos. So I'm going to do the start sits for every position. Those are going to be out on Tuesday, and then there's not going to be any videos until next Monday, but I will be keeping track of the comments, going through, answering people. So if you guys do have questions like later on in the week, just comment them on whatever video, and I will be getting back to every single person still. So no rankings, no injury report, but I will still be monitoring the comments. So hope that's cool with you guys. If you guys do want to sign up for Underdog Fantasy Football, one of the lines I like for the Monday night game, James Conner, 47.5 rushing yards, had 21 carries last week. He dominated the snaps. You have Darrell Williams on IR. Eno Benjamin was released. I think Connor is going to have a big role in this game. There's always the chance that, the Cardinals kind of get blown out early. They phase away from the run game, but I'm willing to bet on the usage of James Conner this week. If you guys use code Quinn or the link in the description, they will double your first deposit up to $100. So if you are interested in Underdog, link in the description. But now let's jump into some of the buy low options heading into week 12. And to be honest, I felt like there were a ton of big name guys who underperformed this week. Saquon, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Nick Chubb, right? All those guys definitely had down games. But I think at this point in the season, everyone who's playing fantasy, they know who those players are. It's unlikely that people are going to go out and panic on Saquon Barkley or Justin Jefferson after one down game. So I didn't really want to go in depth on those guys. Obviously, if you can buy low on those players, I would be interested. But I kind of wanted to take a different approach for this video, and kind of unintentionally, I thought a lot of the best buy low options this week are tight ends. So it's almost going to be like a tight end edition in the buy low areas. But we're going to start it off with Mark Andrews, who just overall the past 4 or 5 weeks has been a massive underperformer for his fantasy football owners. So he played injured in week 7 and week 8. He put up 0.4 and then 6.3 points in those 2 weeks. Then he misses week 9 with injury. He has a week 10 bye. Then he returns here in week 11. Isn't terrible. 8 targets, 6 receptions for 63 yards, but nothing crazy in his return. So basically he was giving you, nothing or like negative production for 4 straight weeks. Then he comes back, has a mediocre game. He's been dealing with the shoulder injury, the knee injuries, but I think moving forward, it looks like he is going to be much healthier. And if we look back to the first 6 games of the season before he was injured in week 7, this dude was averaging 19.1 PPR points per game. Like, his ceiling at the tight end position was insane. He had actually 22 plus points in 4 out of 6 games. So when healthy, Mark Andrews is an absolute monster. If you look at this Ravens offense with Rashad Bateman down, Mark Andrews is the clear-cut #1 target. There's really no target competition there for Mark Andrews. I know Robinson had a big game. I don't think that's sustainable. Mark Andrews is the clear-cut #1. So I think if you do have the opportunity to go out and buy one of the 2 elite tight ends that are out there in fantasy football, obviously Andrews and Kelsey, I'm going to go out and try to bring in a guy like Mark Andrews. Maybe you try to sell a running back who's overperforming, a wide receiver who's just outside the top 12. I think whatever you can do to try to buy low on Andrews, I would definitely be looking at that. Now we're going to stick at the tight end position here in the buy low portion and talk about TJ Hockenson, who only put up 8.4 PPR points. We saw the Vikings get absolutely blown out by the Cowboys. Just a brutal performance offensively and defensively for the Vikings. But when we look at Hockenson's usage, he hasn't done anything crazy for the Vikings in his 3 games there, but the usage is just suggesting that he is going to have some big games coming in his 3 games with the Vikings. His targets have been 9, 10, and 9. Obviously, it's a small sample size, but if we take the targets per game on that 3-game sample size, there is not a tight end except for Travis Kelce who is averaging more targets per game, like not even close. And in those games, he is only averaging 12 points per game with the Vikings. So he's definitely been underperforming in terms of the usage he is seeing. I think if we had to, choose one guy who's going to be the tight end 3 rest of season behind Kelce and Andrews, I think it's a pretty decent shot that Hockenson can be that guy. And I just imagine he is not valued in that way. So if you can buy low on Hockenson, I would definitely be interested. The usage he's been seeing is very, very encouraging moving forward, even if the numbers in the stat sheet haven't been great so far. A guy who I also think is in that tight end 3 contention, to be the number 3 guy behind Kelce and Andrews is going to be Dalton Schultz. He's coming off a down game, 3 receptions for 22 yards, only 5.2 PPR points. And when you look at Schultz on the season, he's only averaging 7.7 points per game. Obviously, a lot of that is due to injuries. He plays injured, or he plays, then gets injured, has to leave. But if we look at the sample size with Schultz playing with Dak, it lines up with Schultz being healthy, and then obviously Dak is going to give him a boost. So in those games with Dak at quarterback, he's averaging 12.3 points per game, and these are his stat lines in those 4 games. 7 for 62, 6 for 74, 6 for 54 and a touchdown, and then 3 for 22 was this past week, really his only down game with Dak. So I think, his value right now is probably pretty low because people do look at that point per game number, and he did have that stretch, in between Dak's injury where he was just giving you nothing for fantasy. I think it's very likely that he outperforms his current value. And if you are trying to make a move at the tight end position, I think he's someone you can get after who's going to have a decent amount of upside rest of season. This Cowboys offense looks strong. He only does have 4 touchdowns in those games with Dak. But if you're telling me he's going to have 7, 6, 6, like 3 receptions in those games, I'm going to be expecting, some positive touchdown regression in the future. And then the final buy low, like I said, it's like the tight end edition. We have David NJOKU. Now he came back, really did nothing in his return here. He's someone that I thought was startable. I thought he would have a bigger role, but it was very clear that he was not 100%, and they were kind of easing him back into this offense. So he only had a 37% snap share and a 41% route participation. When healthy, we saw NJOKU somewhere in that like 70 to 85% route participation. And if you guys have forgotten, he has been out for a few weeks. David NJOKU was an absolute stud before his ankle injury. These are his last 5 games before that ankle sprain. 9 for 89 and a touchdown, 5 for 73, 6 for 88, 3 for 58, and then 7 for 71. That type of volume at the tight end position is not something you're seeing, from every fantasy relevant tight end. And I do think NJOKU has a pretty decent ceiling moving forward. With Watson coming back in week 13, I think there's going to be more passing volume for this offense. Also going to be more touchdown upside for David NJOKU. So I don't think you should be giving up quite as much as you would for a guy like Hockenson or Schultz, just because I think they don't have the injury risk. They're not necessarily competing for opportunities. But I think if you don't want to give up a ton, I think NJOKU is someone who's probably going to be pretty cheap, especially if someone, picked up a waiver wire tight end who's performing decently well. Maybe they're not starting NJOKU. Maybe he was dropped. If you can bring in David NJOKU, if you're really desperate at the tight end position, I do think he's someone who can be solid for you long term. Now, moving over to the players that I'm going to be selling high on, I'm going to be starting it off with EZEKIEL Elliott. Now, I actually think I talked about Zeke as a buy low, maybe after the first game he missed where Tony Pollard had a big game, and I do think that was the right call. Like, if you bought him and, you're saying like, oh, why are you selling him now? You're going to be selling him at a profit if you can trade him. But I do think Zeke will still have a role in this offense. I'm not one of these guys who thinks like, oh, Tony Pollard's coming in, he's just going to take everything. I think Tony Pollard is definitely the better running back. Like, I feel like it's going to be tough to argue that at this point. But I also think there's basically no chance that the Cowboys just totally phase Zeke out of the offense. He's going to be, decently involved whether we like it or not. But in his involvement, he's going to be very touchdown dependent, and he's proven to just have like 0 receiving upside. He has 7 total receptions in 8 games. That is really, really rough at the running back position. But when we're looking back at his last 3 games that he has played in, these are his point numbers in PPR scoring: 15.6, 17.7, and 17.7. So the numbers as of late look really solid. He does have 5 touchdowns in those 3 games, so that's definitely where a lot of the overall production is coming from. So I would be looking to send out offers for guys like James Conner, maybe a Jeff Wilson, players who I think are trending up as the number ones in their backfield the rest of season, but maybe just haven't had those huge breakout games yet. So that's what I'd be looking for. Zeke is not someone where I'm totally panicking and, I need to get him off my roster, but I do think we're going to have some games in the future where he's going to rush for 60 yards, but if he doesn't hit that end zone or he doesn't score twice, you're looking at like a 6-7 point performance, instead of these 17, 18 point games he's been giving you because he has scored 2 touchdowns in those contests. So Zeke is the first sell high player. And then the second sell high player is Christian Watson. Now remember, I'm not saying you need to sell these guys. I'm just saying if you can sell high for like a decent profit, I would be interested. So in the last 2 games, Christian Watson has put up 32.7 and 21.1 PPR points. His stat lines for those games, 4 for 107 and 3 touchdowns, and then 4 for 48 and 2 touchdowns. I honestly like Watson rest of season. I don't think, him breaking out is a fluke. He was a very talented prospect. He's clearly clicking now with Aaron Rodgers, but I imagine rest of season, he's going to be somewhere in that wide receiver 3 territory, probably a mid to high end wide receiver 3 option. If we're not including, teams on bye, if we have the whole wide receiver pool, I imagine that's where he's going to be, the wide receiver 26 to wide receiver 32 range, somewhere in there. But I do think after these 2 monster games, someone in your league is probably going to go out and they're going to overpay for a guy like Christian Watson, because if Watson did not score these 5 touchdowns, we're probably thinking, oh, okay, it's good to see he's more involved. He had a big yardage game, but I mean, the 5 touchdowns, these performances have been wildly screwed by those touchdown numbers. I don't even know if we can count on Aaron Rodgers to average 2.5 touchdowns rest of season, and that's what Christian Watson has put up in these past 2 games. So I just think I'm looking at this Packers offense. I think they're going to be semi-competent. Lazard's going to be decent. Watson is going to be decent, but we cannot continue to expect Watson to put up 4 for 50 and 2 touchdowns. It's just not going to happen. There are going to be games upcoming where he's 3 for 30, 4 for 40, and he doesn't get into the end zone, and then his value is kind of going to fall back down. So I think if you can sell him at wide receiver 2 prices, I'd be interested. If you can try to flip him for a guy like Michael Pittman, who I think people are very low on, but I like rest of season, maybe Watson plus another piece for a guy like Chris Godwin, I'd be looking to move him for some of these, kind of underperforming, undervalued wide receivers. So those are my 2 sell highs, Zeke and Christian Watson. Some of my buy lows at the tight end position, Mark Andrews, TJ Hockenson, Dalton Schultz, and David NJOKU. If you guys enjoyed the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. As always, if you have any questions, drop them down below. Remember, there won't be the rankings videos, injury videos, but I will still be looking to the comment sections, making sure I'm getting back to you guys. But thank you guys again, and I will see you in the next one.